Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 249. Every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once you grow up. Pablo Picasso.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Today's episode is brought to you by Blackbox. Blackbox is a new platform and community that is all about financial freedom for filmmakers like you. If you join Blackbox, you will be transformed from being a worker to being a maker of your own content. And you'll be making steady passive income from the global market. Blackbox currently allows you to upload your stock footage once, get it to many global agencies, and then allows you to share that passive income stream with your collaborators. Whether you want to submit old footage that's been sitting around in your hard drives or create brand new content, Blackbox is for you. It's really quite revolutionary. With Blackbox, filmmakers can concentrate on making great content while Blackbox takes care of all the business BS. Just visit www.blackbox.global to find out more. Today's show is also sponsored by Studio Unknown. Studio Unknown is a crack team of audio post professionals known for quality sound on any indie budget. Whether you need a lush surround sound mix or a quick festival submission pass, Studio Unknown can help you with all of your post sound needs, from sound design and mix to Foley, ADR, and even a custom score. Contact Studio Unknown and mention the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, and you'll get 50% off one day of ADR or 10% off your complete post sound package. Just go to studiounknown.com. Now, today's guest is Carole Kirschner. Carole has been in the business for a few decades now, and she started out working with a little-known director by the name of Steven Speilberg. She was the vice president of Amblin's first television department. So she was there at the very beginning when Steven Spielberg was getting into television. She now runs the CBS Diversity Writers Program. She is also the director of the WGA Showrunner Training Program, and she's an entertainment career coach, which means that she shows you how to actually break through and break into the business. Now, I've talked to Carole extensively after this interview, and we've talked a bunch about the business, and I got to tell you, she really knows her stuff. She knows how the game is played. She knows what those unwritten rules are of Hollywood. So if you're interested in trying to break into Hollywood, into the Hollywood system, this is the podcast you need to be listening to because Carole really knows her stuff. She also has a course called the Hollywood Boot Camp, which kind of takes you through a lot of her concepts on how to break in and actually maintain a career in the business. And she also wrote the book, Hollywood Game Plan, How to Land a Job in Film, Television, and Digital Entertainment. She is a wealth of information, so sit back, get ready to take some notes, and enjoy my conversation with Carole Kirschner. I'd like to welcome to the show Carole Kirschner. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Hi, I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on as well because you are a unique guest because you work with writers, but yet you also coach a lot about how to make it in the business, and you have the street cred to back that statement up.
Well, I do a lot of things. It's true.
Yes, you are a jack of all trades, and I think we all have to be a little bit of that nowadays to even survive in this business or in the world in general.
Yes.
So first and foremost, how did you get into the business?
Well, the first thing I did in the business was I was a stand-up comic. And
Awesome.
Loved it, but it was really clear that I wasn't Whoopi Goldberg or, Sarah Silverman.
Sure.
And if you're not one of them, your life as a stand-up comic is traveling 300 days a year and
brutal.
Being treated like dirt.
Yes.
So
yeah, I've got a lot of friends who are stand-ups. It's brutal.
It is brutal. And I needed more respect, actually.
Touche.
So I went to the other side of the desk. I was with a small television production company. Then I went to CBS in comedy development. Mm-hmm. And from there, I was asked to start Steven Spielberg's first Amblin Television department.
Who's this Steven Spielberg you speak of?
Nobody. He's nobody. Nobody knows him.
No one knows him. He's a young up and comer. Got it.
He's an up and comer. And the interesting thing when I was there was I realized the three most powerful words in the entertainment industry are Steven would like, and doors open like crazy.
Yes, it's true. That's great. Those are very powerful words.
Yeah. And so after that, I worked at a couple of international companies, being their U.S. development department, and then became a consultant because my kid was 2 years old. I was traveling all the time and said, why am I a mom if I can't be with my kids? So became a consultant. And as a consultant, I created the CBS Diversity Writers Program, which I'm very proud of. Like 100 people have gone through it, and we've launched the career of 60 writers of color. And we now have in our alumni 3 showrunners, 5 people that have pilots, including a script commitment at HBO, and a lot of co-EPs and people that are coming up the ranks. And because of my work with CBS, I was asked to help Jeff Melvoin create the curriculum for the WGA Showrunner Training Program. And because of that, I was asked to be the director of the Humanitas New Voices program. So CBS is for baby writers, Humanitas is for emerging writers, and the WGA Showrunner Training Program is for the highest people in the television business. And I'm also an author and a speaker and an entertainment career coach. I work with lots of screenwriters and other kinds of filmmakers.
So during your time at all of these companies, I'm sure you heard a couple of pitches.
Yeah, just one or two. But when I added it up, it was kind of shocking. I've heard more than 3,000 pitches. I've read more than 5,000 scripts. I've been involved in buying hundreds of scripts and developing dozens of television series.
That's insane. So what are some of the key elements you look for in a pitch?
Great question. Everybody says passion, and I absolutely look for passion.
Passion will only get you so far.
It'll only get you so far. The thing to remember is that a pitch is a carefully crafted performance. And what I look for in a television pitch are the first thing is the characters, first and foremost. And can these characters and the conflict between the characters sustain 100 episodes? That is what's different between a TV pitch and a film pitch. And can the central concept and the conflict that's inherent in the central conflict support 100 episodes? Then I look for, and going back to characters, it's truly a fresh character. It's a fresh take on a character. And one of the things not to do in a pitch when you're talking about your characters is do a laundry list. Alex Ferrari is a quirky filmmaker, and his stay-at-home wife is very interested in playing the piano. And the way you want to introduce characters is through a story. Set them in a scene. And then you want to talk about the hook. And the hook has to be, why would people watch this? In a universe of 485 television series that are scripted. And you need a strong hook. Then you need to talk about the world and why is this a new take on the world? Super important is the tone and the genre. And most writers don't really get what tone is. And when you're describing tone, it's really helpful to talk about or reference other films or TV shows. People often, when they do that, they think, this is a procedural, so I'm going to talk about another procedural. But that's not the tone. And forgive me for people who know this. It's just so many people I work with don't really understand this. Tone is how you tell the story. Right. Are you NCIS Los Angeles or are you Ray Donovan? There's a very different tone.
Right.
And if it's a TV series, you want to know what your pilot story is, but you're not going to go beat by beat. When I was at CBS and Amblin.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
When people did that, my eyes would glaze over and I'd say, please stop, internally,
You always try to be as nice as possible.
I was pretty nice. Okay. Then the last thing is knowing what the basic arcs are for 5 seasons. All you need is a short paragraph on what happens in that season. Okay. How the character moves from the beginning to the end and of that season, and how the storyline evolves from the beginning to the end of that season.
Okay. So for tones, like a perfect example would be like Modern Family and Big Bang are both very different.
Exactly.
They're both number one comedies, and they're both 30-minute comedies, but the tones are completely different.
Completely different. It's like the difference between New Girl and Insecure. Totally different.
Right. Now, when you were working with Steven Spielberg at Amblin, what were some of the things you learned from that experience that you can kind of give us as tips?
Sure. Other than the 3 most powerful words are Steven would like.
And you have to have some sort of connection between Steven with that for that to work.
Yes. Well, if you're running his television division, then you have that. Yes. Excuse me one second. Sure. What did I learn? Well, I learned that Steven has a very short attention span. I mean, he's brilliant, but you have to grab him in the first minute or two. And he's really only interested in high quality concepts and series ideas, something he would be proud to put his name on.
What years were you there with him?
I was there from 1988 to 1990. So it was 100 years ago. And it was...
Was that that was before or after Amazing Stories?
That was right after Amazing Stories. Amazing Stories did well.
Yeah.
And what happened is that he was at Universal and they loved him, of course, and wanted him to be happy. Yeah. And so they said, why don't you start a television division? And here was the interesting thing. He was hoping, the company was hoping that there were a number of films that could be turned into television series. And the networks were very excited because they thought they were going to get Indiana Jones. And he was thinking more Harry and the Hendersons. Right. So there was a little disconnect there. And we did do Harry and the Hendersons.
Was there a show? Was there a show, Harry and the Hendersons?
There was. It was on a cable channel.
Oh, wow.
We did Tiny Toons, which was actually... Genius. Yeah, it was brilliant. You want to know how it started?
Please. I'd love to know that story of that, because that was pretty groundbreaking and pretty edgy for what... It was. For the time.
It really was. So the guy that was head of merchandising for Universal came in and said, plush toys. And I went, yes. And he said, if we did Looney Tunes as small characters, as young characters, think about more of the plush toys we could sell. And that was a genesis of it. And then we had great writers come in and wonderful artists, and every character design was approved by Steven. One day, I had to take 7 flights in one day to get to his remote location to have him sign off on a character design.
This is before the internet.
Way before the internet. The internet wasn't even a twinkle in a millennial's eye. So, his hand is really on everything. And we had a private chef, so that was really nice. That's trying to think, answering your question, what else I learned there. I learned that you have to be discerning. You don't throw a lot of stuff against the wall with Steven.
Mm-hmm.
You really, really, really go through and carefully determine which ones to bring to him, because he has so much going on.
Oh my God. Yes.
And he really respects writers, and he respects things that are fun and entertaining. You can totally get him enraptured if you have a concept that he's interested in.
Now, so during your tenure there, I'm assuming you had some hits, and I'm assuming you had some not so big hits. What did you learn from the failures and from the successes during your tenure?
Well, you know what? I go back to what the pitch is, what the project is, because even if you're at Amblin, there's Amblin shows that don't succeed. It is the difference between them are shows that succeed, are characters that we haven't seen in that way before, and the stories that are being told in a fresh way. There's not that many new stories, but it's what the approach is. And it's really having a concept and characters, this is so obvious, that connect with the audience, but that is entertaining. I think there's two kinds of shows and probably two kinds of movies as well. And one is the should watch, like this is important with a capital I. And then there's have to watch, want to watch, because it's so entertaining. And you don't want to go for the have to watch. You can put have to watch elements into must watch, want to watch, can't wait to watch. But you don't want to lead with important with the capital I.
No, not so much. Because then it turns into like a school project.
Yes. and a lesson. And people don't turn to entertainment for lessons for the most part. There's exceptions to everything.
If you're a good writer, you can sneak some of that stuff in.
Absolutely. And you should. It it gives it depth, but don't lead with it.
Absolutely. Now, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see beginning writers make?
Oh, I love that question. And I mean that. I love that question because I don't want people to make mistakes, and if I can help them not make mistakes. One of the mistakes is getting your script out before it's ready. And thinking, you know what, this is a draft and there's other things I'm going to do, but I want to get this to this manager or agent right away. Don't do that. Have your script vetted by a number of people before you do that golden opportunity. Because the truth is you have one shot. And
would you agree the same thing would go for a film? Once it's done, don't rush it out to a festival or rush it out to a producer without sound, without color. Make sure the cut's tight. Make sure you see have a lot of people watch it and take notes and things like that.
Absolutely. Make sure your soundtrack is there.
There's always
the one you're going to use. The music, the cues. I mean, any material. I call it being blazing hot, and it doesn't matter whether it's a script, a web series, a short, or a feature. It has to be incredible. Good work sometimes goes unnoticed, but great work never does. And you want your project to be great, blazing hot before you get it out there. You should have a community, a group of people who you trust, who will be honest with you. Hopefully kind, but honest. And it's ready when everybody that you show it to goes, wow, that's great. You're there.
And in all honesty, I think kind is, when it comes in that world, kind is a bit overrated. If you have some friends who can tell you the truth, because the world is not going to be kind to you if you don't send it out in the proper way.
It's true, but you don't have to decimate somebody.
Absolutely. I get you what you're saying. Constructive.
It should be constructive. It should be honest. You shouldn't hold back.
But don't be abusive.
Don't be a dick. That's what I say.
I think that's the best. That is the best advice out of anything anyone's ever said in this business. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. Just don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick. And because, producers, executives, we have the life is too short list. Mm-hmm. And if you get on that, you're not going to get more than one chance.
Oh, that's a great term. Life is too short list, because you're right. And I'm sure you've met these people, the most talented, just genius kind of talents and experience, but they're dicks. And you're
it's the LITS list. LITS. Life is too short. And you get one shot.
Now, you talk a lot about the unwritten rules in the film business. Can you share a few of these unwritten rules?
Yes, I certainly can. One of them is understanding that this is a business. Mm-hmm. It looks really casual. Everybody loves you. And I always have a saying, in this town, nobody likes anything. They love it until they stop returning your calls.
Right.
The unwritten rule is, another unwritten rule is you never back somebody into a corner by asking them for something. You always give them a gracious out. Will you read my script? That's bad. What you want to say is, I know how busy you are. Or will you look at my reel? Mm-hmm. Will you watch my web series? Mm-hmm. You say something like, I know how busy you are. If you have the time and you can spare the time, if you'd be willing to look at my fill in the blank and give me your thoughts whenever you have the time, I'd really appreciate it. And if you don't have the time, if there's someone in your office that would look at it, I would really appreciate that too. So It's don't back somebody into a corner. It's knowing your story and being memorable. Everybody in this business, filmmakers, directors, writers, producers, you're storytellers. So your personal story should be memorable. Mm-hmm. And people that don't know what their story is, and I work a lot with clients and my people at CBS on how you craft what I call your personal A story, mm-hmm. which is a chronological narrative mm-hmm. of your life with you as the protagonist, highlighting what's colorful and successes. Another mistake that people make is being too intimate too quickly. And I'm not talking about being sexually intimate. I'm talking about telling
familiar.
Too familiar. Hi, let me tell you about my eating disorder. Hi, I'm bipolar, but that doesn't get in the way of my work. Right. You don't want to do that. It's really important to follow up. I think so many people feel self-conscious about following up because it feels uncomfortable. You don't want to bug people, but there's the right way to follow up, and you definitely want to stay on people's radar. Another mistake is those obnoxious people at parties and networking events that just talk nonstop at you, that just do monologues.
Yes.
No one wants to be with you. People will say, I've got to go to the bathroom, just because. It should be a dialogue all the time. And
would you agree that in those party situations, when you find someone who's just nonstop talking about themselves and do not even care a bit about who you are or even what you're interested in, they're just there to hear themselves speak? I'm sure you've run into a couple of those during your tenure.
Yes, and it makes me want to run the other way. Actually, it makes me want to smack them and say, "Stop it!"
Now,
no one cares.
Now, I'm curious though. Do you find people that are successful in the business doing that, as well as people trying to break into the business doing that at a party, let's say?
There are narcissists everywhere, and
yes, there are.
I think our business has a bigger share of it, perhaps, than others.
Okay.
And very successful people, super successful people generally are more willing to have not an honest conversation, because nobody's really honest, but to have a casual conversation. But there are people that have had some success who are so full of themselves, and they don't understand social manners. And so, you'll get that. I see it in newcomers. I see it in, unfortunately, in experienced professionals as well. It's more of a personality disorder, if you ask me, and manners.
Just don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick, man. Just don't be a dick. And I don't mean just men. I mean women too. Yes. Nobody should be a dick.
Period. Now, what are some key elements you see in people who not only are able to break into the business, but are able to thrive in the business?
That is a great question. The first, when I sort of studied people who were enormously successful over all these years, I decided I wanted to know. There's 4 things that they all have in common. And number 1 is blazing hot material. Their material is exceptional. And if it's not, it means their aunt is the president of a studio or network.
There's that.
There's that. So blazing hot material, and then a really smart self-marketing strategy. They know how to talk about themselves. And again, when I work with clients, I break it into 3 categories. There's your personal log line, which is what do you do? And that's your answer when you're at a party or a networking event or meeting. And then there's the longer one, which is that personal A story I talked about, which answers the question, so tell me about yourself. And then there's something I call your personal nuggets, which is the anecdotes of your life that show why you're different, why you're memorable. Because, as an executive, I would meet with 6 or 7 people in a day. And what you want when you walk out of that door is for me to remember who you are. So it's blazing hot material, a smart self-marketing strategy, and then a vibrant community of people where you have mutually beneficial relationships, and then being industry savvy, not being tone deaf about what's going on, knowing who the players are, knowing what the trends are.
So I shouldn't be pitching Harvey Weinstein right now, is what you're saying?
I wouldn't. Unless you're willing to go to the island that he's on.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. He's not going to be at Sundance this year? Not so much? Not so much this year?
Maybe not.
But we laugh, but that's a perfect example of someone, that, is completely tone deaf about what's going on in the business.
Yeah. Yeah. It's being smart. And if you have all those 4 categories going for you, you, in my opinion, are going to be successful. And you're not a dick. You're going to be successful.
I was in a meeting once with an agent at one of the highfalutin agencies, and they said, what I'm looking for in a director is a politician, an artist, a politician, and a businessman. And that's why
absolutely.
And that's why Spielberg and Cameron and Del Toro and Nolan, these guys have all 3 of those things. And
I couldn't agree with you more.
It's true, right? It's like you really do need to be, you have to understand, you have to be an artist first, but you have to understand business, and you also have to be a politician, because you can't just kind of go in there and just, throw your weight around until, now James Cameron can do that because he's James Cameron. Steven Spielberg can do that. Nolan could do that. They're at a certain level in the business that if they want, they can go throw their weight around a little bit because they have a track record. But generally speaking, on the way up, and even while you're there, you should always be those 3 people. And I think Spielberg, Steven, is probably the poster child for that, because I think he has that. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. He is a businessman. I mean, clearly he's an artist. We know his artistry.
Yes.
He's a really shrewd businessman.
Yes.
And he's not a dick. He's a pleasure to be around.
Mm-hmm.
He's nice, he's self-effacing, he's soft-spoken.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
He's great. I mean,
but those are those elements that you really should look into as core elements of even a writer, as well as a director or producer. Those are three elements you really have to understand and embrace. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. And another part of that is knowing how to manage up and manage down.
Oh, yeah.
So you are treating your producer or your executive well, but you're also treating the assistant well. Because I'll tell you a story. When I was hiring a head of development for Amblin, there was a guy who had great credentials, but he was really a jerk to my assistant. And she told me about it. And even though we had a really good meeting, I didn't hire him.
Right.
Because, that's one of the reasons, because assistants are the gatekeepers to their boss. And the other is everybody starts in this business as an assistant. And another story is when I was at CBS, there was a big time showrunner who came in, and every meeting we had with him, he said, "Hi, nice to meet you." He didn't remember who I was. And then when I went to Amblin, he wanted to set up a meeting. And I didn't say, "I don't remember who you are." I had the meeting, but I wasn't predisposed to buy from him.
Right. And that was a political move as well to take the meeting, because you really didn't want to meet with him, I'm assuming, back then.
I wasn't enthusiastic about it, but of course I was going to meet with him.
Because it's politics. You have to do certain things like that sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll tell you a mistake I made, because I made which is why I wrote my book, because I wanted somebody to teach me how to do it so I wouldn't step on landmines, because I stepped on plenty of them. Ultimately, I learned because I moved up in the business. But here's an example of what not to do. I was doing a general meeting because when I left that small production company that I started at, I waged a campaign to get my next job. And that's what you have to do. And I met with a very high up, I met with the president of Fox Television. And when this very nice woman came in, I asked her for a Diet Coke.
I could see where this is going.
It turned out to be Andrea Baines, who was the president of Fox at the time. And
how'd that meeting go?
I wasn't the only person in the meeting, so I was there with my bosses, so that made it even worse. But you know what? I apologized profusely. I sent her a funny note, and she and I actually became friends, and she was a mentor of mine after that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. But that's genius, though. But that happens. That definitely happens. Oh, God, you really need to do your homework, I guess, before you go into meetings like that or into environments like that. You should know those things. Would you agree?
There's a whole section in the book, and when I work with clients about how you prepare for meetings, it's essential. And here's another mistake I made. I'm sort of mortified by it. I was meeting with somebody who was high up at ABC because I was interested. And when I got my CBS job, I got an offer from ABC as well as CBS, although after this meeting, I have no idea why. So I wanted to impress upon her how knowledgeable I was about the business and how I knew things that, just regular people didn't know. And I sort of said something about a woman, another executive, and I said, she doesn't return calls and she doesn't, nobody is really happy with her. And turned out it was the executive I met with's best friend. It was like, oh my God. So don't gossip. That's another one that I see. But
gossip.
Don't gossip.
Yeah, because you never know who knows who. It's such a small business. It's so minuscule. I can't.
It is. And just back away from it. Just don't get him. And television writers that are in writers' rooms, they can be really political. Mm-hmm. And so you want to make sure you're Switzerland and you don't go with either side. And it's hard. It's, with my CBS mentees and writers, we talk about that a lot because that's a landmine, Mm-hmm. So it's, being nice, but not getting into the fray.
Right. Now, how do you feel about internships?
Internships?
Mm-hmm.
They're the best. Mm-hmm. They're fantastic. My daughter, who is a senior at UCLA in playwriting, but is an aspiring comedy writer, mm-hmm. she's had 4 internships, and her last was at Funny or Die. And because she works so hard and she's fun to be around and she's funny, even though I'm her mom, I can say that. Mm-hmm. She worked at Sony too. They said, we'll help you get a job when you get out of school. Mm-hmm. So internships are great for making connections, assuming that you're not a jerk about it and mm-hmm. people go, oh man, she's just sucking up to me because she wants to have a connection. Mm-hmm. And they're a way to prove your work ethic, and they're a way to get jobs out of internships. Many people get offered jobs because companies and production companies would rather hire somebody they know mm-hmm. who is really good for that entry-level position than have to go out to new people.
That's exactly how I got my first job. I interned for 4 months at a production company in Miami, and when my boss quit, they're like, well, that kid's been here for 4 months, give him the job. And then all of a sudden, I was the head of dubbing.
Wow.
And tech support at a big production company. So, but that's how I did it. And just by coming in every day. And I would also add, I would think that make sure who you're interning for, and because there's a lot of abuse in regards to internships and what you're done. And if you're not learning, and you're literally just, if you're working at a big company, it's different. But if you're looking for a smaller production company and all they've got you doing is picking up laundry 24/7, do you agree that's probably not the best idea?
I couldn't agree more. As I like to say, not all internships are created equal. The first internship my daughter had, mm-hmm. they sat her in a corner in a white wall, in front of a white wall,
poor thing.
And never asked. She kept saying, can I do this? Can I do that? And they went, no, it's covered. And so I encouraged her to not to leave because and she did it really politically correctly. Mm-hmm. But no, you're absolutely right. If you are just doing runs all the time, you're not learning anything. If they have you in a corner, if you're picking up laundry, as you said, all the time, if somebody's abusing you or ignoring you, then that's not the right internship, and don't stay. Leave on a good note because you never know, but don't stay.
Now, what advice would you give people on how to network properly?
Oh, good question. First of all, I hate the word networking. Mm-hmm. When I think about it, I think about smarmy agents, backing
Here's my card. How you doing? We got to do lunch.
Here's my card.
I got to do lunch.
Here's my script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here, look at my reel.
Yeah. On my phone, boom, here you go. Watch it in the corner. God,
in the corner, and make
it's the worst. Oh,
and
God.
How do you get out of that? You just go, I see my friend, and you run away. The right way, in my opinion, is to think about it as connecting rather than networking.
Right.
And so it's finding people, it's connecting with people that you have a genuine connection with. And my number one rule for connecting with people is to focus on what you can do for them.
Yes.
Why, people, when you say you need to go network, they go, let me just die now, is because they're afraid they're going to be that smarmy person and be trying to get something out of somebody. But if you go in with the mindset, how can I help this person that I'm talking to? How can I be of service? What do I, they need a sound engineer. Do I know somebody who's willing to do that, and give them the name? I once had lunch with a showrunner who'd been through the showrunner program, who we became friends. And he was talking about doing, his new project was on serial killers. And I said, I just listened to a show on NPR about an interesting serial killer. Let me send you the link. It's as small as that. Mm-hmm. The other is having that personal log line in a story, knowing it well enough so that when you talk to somebody, you can say what you do in a way that's interesting and compelling and memorable.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Without being obnoxious about it. And then following up is so important. Mm-hmm. And if you have a genuine connection with somebody, wait a week mm-hmm. and then reach out and say, you want to grab a coffee, you want to go to a movie, you want to come over to my bad movie night or my poker game. And it's doing events. If you're that kind of person, mm-hmm. it's putting on social kinds of, small events, a brunch, a poker night.
Screening of the room.
Screening of the room. Yes. Bad movie night. Screening of the room. And what I tell my clients is, put on an event like that and say to your friends, bring somebody with you that I don't know. That's the price of admission. Mm-hmm. I have a writer client who, I go back to poker because there's a lot of poker going around with writers. And she started a bi-monthly poker game. And she said, you can come, you can drink my beer, you can eat my chips, you can lose money, you can win money. But the price of admission is you got to bring somebody I don't know. And after 6 months, she had a much expanded circle of friends and contacts.
Of course. That's a genius way of doing it, actually.
Yeah.
But that's smart. You're providing a value to people right off the bat. Absolutely. That's an entertainment of getting away, of gambling, having a poker night. And it's a very subtle way of making connections.
Absolutely. And, that came out of the fact that before I met my husband, some girlfriends and I were sitting around saying, we can't meet any men. And so we decided to have a bring your old boyfriend party. Just because you don't want them doesn't mean somebody else might not.
That's genius. That's a movie right there. That's a pitch.
There you go.
That's a pitch. And what happened?
People met, there was no marriages that came out of it, but people met somebody and dated and stuff like that.
Sure. It was a network. It was a connection.
It was a connection.
It was a connection event. Now, do you have any tips on how to handle rejections?
I do, as a matter of fact, because I've certainly experienced it myself. At Amblin, they didn't pick up my contract for second term. Mm-hmm. I was devastated. And what they actually did is they sort of shut down the department, but it doesn't matter, for a while, but it doesn't mm-hmm. matter. And I bought a lot of shoes. I drove around listening to this R&B song called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, crying, weeping.
Poor thing.
And, and there was some ice cream involved in all this, too much. Mm-hmm. And so what I tell people is, and my husband even taught me this too, feel the feelings, wallow in that rejection and that pain, and do it for 2 or 3 days. You don't have to leave your house. You don't have to get out of your pajamas. Just feel bad. And then move on. Move on. Reach out to people. Say, I'm back in the world. Say, I'm looking for a new gig. Do you want to get coffee? Go back out and be social and move on and have sort of a game plan for what you want to do. But don't deny the feelings. Feel them, but then move on. And I think that's the best way to handle rejection. And know going in, everybody gets rejected. Everybody gets rejected.
I remember going back to Steven. It took him forever to get Lincoln off the ground. No one would finance it. And it was Steven Spielberg. And
exactly.
No one wanted to finance Schindler's List for that matter, either. So He had to do it himself. But people get rejected all the time. Everyone does.
And if you have the expectation that I'm different and I'm never going to get rejected, I think the pain of it, the shock of it will be
Brutal.
Enormous. But if you go in going, okay, that's one down. Here's another thing. When you get rejected, do not smack talk, do not bad talk the people that rejected you. I know that there's lots of assistants that work for people that are jerks. And what I say to them is when people say, hey, how was that? Because there's some, well-known jerks. You just say, I learned how to deal with big personalities. And when they say, why did you leave? You say, you know what? It just wasn't a fit. And that's enough.
That's a very Hollywood. That's so Hollywood. Those two lines are perfect, though, but they're political. That's what it is. You have to be kind of the word is political. I think more than anything else, you have to be able to maneuver your way nicely if you're going to move forward.
Yes, and you don't want to sever any ties. And listen, if you're bad mouthing somebody, it's going to get back to them. Right. It's going to get back to them. And, political is not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. It's sort of, artists go, but I'm above that. But you're not. No. This is a business. I'm sure people on your show have said, show business. Show is the art and business is the politics. Mm-hmm. And you need both.
You have to understand the whole ecosystem.
Exactly.
The circle of life, Hakuna Matata,
exactly
of the entire business, and it is just that. And I've run into so many filmmakers and screenwriters that don't get the business. They just have this passion of the art and this and that. And a friend of mine, Suzanne Lyons, she says the word show and there's the word business, and the word business has twice as many letters as the word show.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to steal that from her.
I stole it from her, and I told her that I'm like, and that's how important the business side is, because without that business, the art goes nowhere.
That's exactly right. And remember, with few exceptions, buyers are in business to make money. Mm-hmm. It does not, and some are just for the art, but you can't stay afloat unless you're independently wealthy. So another thing about pitching, another thing about selling is put yourself in their shoes. What is going to work for them? What works for their brand? What works? What do they need? Not just, you're going to love this, but really, what do they need? Mm-hmm. And you have to, and that's just true. That's true when you're connecting with people. Mm-hmm. It's true with everything.
Do your homework.
Know how you can be of help, how you can be the solution to what their problem is.
Right. In other words, don't go to Disney and pitch a slasher movie. It's not
exactly
not a good fit.
And Disney's everywhere now, so
they own everything, don't they? They I think they own everything now. I think
they're going to rule the world. Yes.
I mean, it's insane what Disney's doing.
It's smart business.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, it's smart business, but buying 20th Century Fox, that's a pretty big. I mean,
that's a big buy, and on some hand, it makes me sad because we need individual voices. We really do.
I mean, is there going to be? Is there a Predator in the new 20th Century Fox? Is there, an Aliens franchise? Is it, all these amazing franchises that 20th Century Fox created? Are they going to be created now under Disney? Are they going to have their same anonymity that Pixar and Marvel and Star Wars has?
I think they will retain a lot of their brand because their brand's so successful.
Why would you mess with it? And I think, and it's funny because you look at Fox because Fox is literally like when they bought Marvel, they bought Pixar, they bought Star Wars. They're smaller, huge brands, but smaller than themselves.
Yes.
But when buying Fox, it's like buying Warner Brothers. Like you're buying your equal or close to your equal. And how do you treat that? And I'm assuming they would hopefully treat it in the same manner they treated Pixar, with some oversight, but still keep it as its own kind of brand. I'm hoping, because Fox did create some insane properties and films over the years.
I think that's astute. If a person had a magic, a crystal ball, that's what I think is going to happen, because that is in Disney's best interest, is to have another distribution system that has its own brand.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. Well, like Touchstone was back in the day. That's when, Eisner turned Touchstone into the R Disney. Because they had to back in the day. And that was another brand that Disney was able to pump out pretty raw movies, our movies back in the day. So I think that will be hopefully what they do with Fox. But anyway, we've gone off topic. So can you talk a little bit about your Hollywood Game Plan book? We've mentioned it a few times. What is the book, and tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So it's called Hollywood Game Plan: How to Land a Job in Film, TV, or Digital Entertainment. And it's really for people who are breaking in and people who are in but want to move up a little, who are in for a while and want to move up. And I've had people say, it's used in colleges and universities sort of around the country. And I've had people who went to very pricey film school who said, you know what, but we didn't get this information in film school. It's how you get an internship. It's how you do a resume and a cover letter, although you can get some of that online. But it's the unwritten rules that we talked about. It's, if you're coming to LA, it's where to live, it's what to wear, it's how to prepare for a meeting, it's how to follow up without being annoying, it's how you create your own personal, entertainment industry brand. It's about how you maneuver through the world in Hollywood without making the big mistakes. How you move in, move up, really how you set yourself apart, how you get that first job, what you have to do, where do you meet people, what do you say when you meet people, how do you make sure that you get asked back, when you're an intern and that you're asked to work there. How do you make sure that your first job, you're doing a fantastic job? It covers all of that.
Excellent. And then you also have a course called the Hollywood Boot Camp, right?
Yeah, Carole Kirschner's Hollywood Boot Camp. And some of the material that's in the book is in the boot camp. But what it is it's a video course and it's streaming. You can watch it however you want. You can watch it all at once. There's 20 modules. You can watch one at a time and then go to the grocery store. It covers some of the same material, but it's much more in-depth. There's exercises that you can do, and there's lots of stories and examples that help to illuminate what the points are. I talk about great emails, and I read the emails so that people know, how do you write the right email to follow up? How do you write the right email to introduce yourself and ask for a general meeting? It's things like that.
It's really it's basically a blueprint or roadmap on how to maneuver in the business in Hollywood.
Absolutely. How to break in, how to maneuver, how not to be a dick.
I don't know if there's a book or a course on how to do that, my dear.
Well, here's all the things to do to not be a dick, but I can't make you not be a dick.
Exactly. We'll give you the tips. You can lead the horse to water.
That's right. That's right. But it's what are the steps? Because a lot of people go, I don't even know where to start. Or I'm in, but I've lost traction. How do I get traction again?
Right. And it's just such a, once you're hot, and then it goes away really quickly. And how you bring traction back. And I went through that with projects of my own where I was being, brought in by the studios and I was hot for a minute and I didn't prepare properly. And by the time I had that script ready, it was over. Time was the light has left, that they've moved on, and trying to get back in was very difficult. So that was a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah. It's funny because for a while with my clients, I did career, 911. How do you rehabilitate yourself? And, I've certainly worked with some of my clients about that too. And it's important to know what you need to be doing, what you can be doing on a regular basis to move your career forward. A lot of people just don't know. So the book and the course talk about what you should be doing sort of daily on a regular basis to get to what your goals are and how you set your goals. How in the course, in the streaming course, we talk about a mission statement because a lot of people don't think about that. They only think about what's the immediate job I want to get. They don't think about what their core values are and how to make sure that when they're making their decisions based around that. That's sort of esoteric. The other things in it are very hands-on and very specific.
Now, I want to ask you, I have a bunch of questions I ask all of my, a few questions like rapid fire that I ask all of my guests. I'm going to ask you in a second, but you brought up something that I've never had an opportunity to ask anybody with your experience in the business this. And I know it exists, but I want to hear your point of view on this. Something called director's jail or writer's jail or EP jail, where they either have a flop or have multiple flops where the point where they can't even get a meeting, but they had huge successes prior to that. Does that exist? And how do you get out of that?
Really good question. Yes, it exists, but the truth is there's two ways out of it. And there's three ways. One is that your material, your next project, your next script, your next web series is blazing hot. That can't be denied. The second is that you're a pleasure to work with. Some people who are not a pleasure to work with when they get into director's jail or writer's jail, people go, great, let them stay there. I don't care. Right. And the third is to keep up your connections and to keep it up in a positive way so that when you do have that new piece of material, people are willing to take a risk. If you have 20 years of flops, you may want to think about a different business. But everybody has flops. Sure. It's how you treat people. It's whether or not your next project and the one after that is blazing hot and fits the marketplace. And then it's making sure that you don't go into a hole and not stay connected to people.
There was a moment in time I remember back in, I want to say 89, 88, 89, 90, 91, where a lot of people, and I was still in high school during that time, but I heard, because I was studying the business back then, that a lot of people were saying, oh, Spielberg he's done, because he had right, exactly. But during that time, I heard that because he did Always, which wasn't a hit, then he did Hook, right, which a big budget, and not a hit, which is honestly one of my favorites of his. I love Hook, and he was just like, oh, I think the Spielberg thing is over. And that's what people do. They talk, and then in '92 had the greatest year ever for any filmmaker with Jurassic Park. And it was in 92, right? 92 or 93, I think one of those years. He had the biggest movie in of the year financially, and the most awarded movie with Schindler's List, back to back. And no one, I think, has ever done that again. So never count anybody out, especially when his name is Steven Spielberg.
And don't count yourself out.
Right.
You know what? Don't count yourself out. That's a terrific example. And that's because Jurassic Park and Schindler's List were terrific. They were
blazing hot.
Yeah, blazing hot. And if they hadn't been, then it would have been much harder. But he's so genius that's how that happens.
Oh God, can you imagine making Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in the same year, releasing them? I mean, God, it's mind blowing. It really is mind blowing. Okay, so let's get to these final questions. So, what advice would you give a filmmaker or screenwriter trying to break into the business today?
Make sure material, this is what everybody says, I'm sure. 3 things. Make sure your material is blazing hot. make sure that you know how to talk about yourself in a way that makes people lean forward and remember you. And the third is make sure that you expand your community of contacts.
Can you tell me what book had the biggest impact on your life or career?
No.
Touché, fair enough.
There were a lot. And, Adventures in the Screen Trade by William Goldman was certainly one of them.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Mailroom was another, learning about how the agents worked. There was another one, but I can't remember what it's called right now. So we have to put a pin in that. Those are
good books. Now, what lesson took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
Work incredibly hard. Don't sail by on your charm and your personality,
talent, right?
Or your talent. You have to do the work. You have to work harder than anybody else, because all the people that are successful, they work really hard. Nobody really looks at that, but they work their ass off. And, I sailed by because I was charming and people liked me for a while. And then I realized, nope. And being political, treating manage up, manage down. I didn't have a problem managing down, but managing, and let go of your ego. You need a healthy ego, but you also need to know when to have it in check.
All right. And 3 of your favorite films of all time?
All That Jazz.
Okay.
Schindler's List.
All right.
And I got to say right now, Lady Bird.
It's on my list. I got the screener. I have to watch that. I gotta watch it. I heard it's really, really good.
Oh, and also Young Frankenstein. Can't leave that out.
I mean, seriously, how can you leave Young Frankenstein out? And where can people find you online?
My website is CaroleKirschner.com. And on that website, you can see a link to the book and to the course. And you can see about my coaching packages and blogs. So CaroleKirschner.com. The boot camp is ckbootcamp.com. And you can go to Amazon for Hollywood Game Plan.
I'll put all of those in the show, links to all of that stuff in the show notes. Carole, thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. Thank you so much for dropping some major knowledge bombs on the Indie Film Hustle tribe today.
Thank you so much, Alex. It was great.
So you guys ready to break into Hollywood after that episode? I am. But no, seriously, thank you, Carole, so much for dropping some great knowledge bombs. And if you guys honestly are looking for a consultant or someone to help you kind of guide your career, help you break in a way, or to help you rebrand yourself, or how to package yourself better to make yourself look more appetizing to agents, to managers, to studios and executives, Carole is the person to go to. So just head over to indiefilmhustle.com/249 for the show notes. And there are links to everything she has there, including her course, Hollywood Boot Camp, and links to her book and to her for consulting and so on. So thanks again, Carole. And if you guys haven't done it already, please head over to filmmakingpodcast.com and leave me a 5-star review on the show. It really helps the show out a lot. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Now, I hope you guys are enjoying the summer, because I am, but of course I am busy hustling like a madman, and I hope you guys are too. And as always, keep that hustle going. Keep that dream alive, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.